If you had been walking down Broad Street that gray, restless afternoon, you could not have missed the chaos left by the rain. Rivers of muddy water trickled along the curbs, puddles swallowed whole by the pothole-filled roads. The city brimmed with restlessness. People hurried, hoping to leave the storm behind, yet the evidence of nature's tantrum was everywhere. Yet amidst the city's impatient rhythm and wet discomfort, a singular figure appeared undisturbed by circumstance, a quiet old man known as Papa Thomas. He sat on a rough wooden bench not far from the splashing traffic, his frame wrapped in an old but clean shirt, and his feet in worn-out slippers that had seen better decades. Papa Thomas had just swept the pathway in front of a modest shop, a job he did with humility every day, and now he paused, allowing the gentle drizzle to cleanse away sweat and worry. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from? He wasn't a man who sought attention. People could pass by Papa Thomas 1,000 times and still never guess the quiet dignity that kept him upright. There was a serenity in his eyes that didn't seem of this world, as if he walked in two realms, one of hardship, another of lasting peace. They say every city has its saints, silent and hidden. Today, fate would reveal why. All it took was a heartbeat for the day's serenity to shatter. A harsh, guttural roar of an engine, followed by a long black Range Rover ripping carelessly through the street. There was no warning, no remorse, as the luxury vehicle splashed through a lake-sized puddle, sending a violet spray of brown water cascading over the sidewalk. In seconds, Papa Thomas was no longer the picture of collected calm. He was drenched from head to toe, the chocolate-tinted water soaking into every fiber of his clothing, running cold over his weathered face and trailing down into his battered slippers. Instinctively, the old man gasped, shielding his eyes, but the damage was done. Shocked witnesses halted in their tracks. Gasps echoed through the air like ricocheting stones. "What is wrong with people?" a woman cried, waving her arm at the now idling Range Rover as the vehicle rolled to a dismissive halt a few meters down the road. The tinted window slid down mechanically, revealing only the silhouette of a sharp chin and painted nails gripping the steering wheel. From inside came a voice, cold and dripping with disdain. "Maybe next time, old man, you'll remember this isn't your village. Don't sit where you block the road." And with the same cold elegance, the window hissed closed, and the Range Rover sped away, leaving a trail of silence much heavier than water. The world seemed to freeze as people looked from the retreating car to Papa Thomas, clothes clinging, face streaked with grime, his only sin resting in a search for pause. Someone muttered, "Did she just?" Another shook her head. "Just wickedness." "Can't even say sorry these days? Papa Thomas never troubles anyone," a young boy chimed, scowling at where the SUV vanished into the horizon. The complaint swirled, indignation bubbling, Yet Papa Thomas only sighed, raising his palm quietly. "Let it rest," he whispered. "Let God see and judge." But in another part of the city, fate had already set in motion the next weave of this tangled story. Miles away, the city shifted from muddied sidewalks to polished marble floors inside the Crystal Gallery, a luxury shopping mall revered by the wealthy. Its air was thick with the scent of imported lilies, and the glass doors seemed too good for mere mortals. Here, the world belonged to people for whom comfort was an inheritance, not a reward. Vanessa strutted through those immaculate halls, her heels ringing sharply on the tiles, a symbol of pride and unapologetic ambition. She was a woman who considered mercy a weakness and empathy a liability. Her features were carved with the confidence of someone who believed every resource, every opportunity, and every inch of respect was hers by default. Lessons bloom. Before entering a high-end jewelry store, she paused, checked her flawless reflection in the window, then lifted her phone for a selfie. Her flawless face adorned her social feed within seconds, captioned, "Only the strong walk over the weak. Boss Queen." Almost as instantly, her fans showered her with admiration. "Boss up, Queen. Teach them what class is about." Her smile widened, proud and imperturbable. She thought herself untouchable, her success built on the notion that life rewarded audacity and trampled compassion. To Vanessa, inconvenience came only in the form of those who had not, who were not willing to become, who simply existed as obstacles in her drive for more. She dismissed the morning's incident with a glint of satisfaction. But elsewhere, the story turned to a different luxury, a mansion whose abundance failed to bring joy, occupied by the man whose gentle soul had just been baptized by mud and humiliation. Though Papa Thomas wore simplicity like a second skin and mingled with those considered less, his world was rooted in a mansion, one owed entirely to his son, Bernard. The house was a dazzling contrast. Lush Persian rugs met expensive hardwood, priceless paintings overlooked a world of soft, golden light. Yet none of these gifts held meaning for the old man. When he pushed open the grand front door that evening, wet and worn, Bernard was the first to see him. The younger man sat slouched over his tablet, eyebrows raised in disbelief at his father's state. "Papa, what happened?" "Your shirt." "Oh, not again." Papa Thomas sat down with a tired chuckle, shaking his head. "Bernard, today I met the rudest woman I've seen in all my years." Bernard's reply was a sigh, thick with worry and frustration. "Papa, I don't understand why you go out there. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? You have everything here. You don't need to sit out there to be exposed to insults or filth or strangers." But his father gazed at him with the unshaken patience of stone. "I can never stop, Bernard. Not until one thing is done. I want to find a good woman for you." Bernard's shock was tangible. A dropped tablet, an exasperated huff, a son's dread that his father's gentle stubbornness would never end. "Papa, not again with this matchmaking. I appreciate what we have. Please." "I have a girlfriend, remember?" Papa Thomas raised a knowing eyebrow, leaning forward. "A girlfriend, you say? Why was I not introduced?" Bernard shuffled in his seat. You know, we're not. I wasn't sure it would last. She's beautiful, Papa. Absolutely stunning. That's never been the problem. And what then is? Bernard hesitated, searching for language that could wound neither his pride nor his heart. Papa, she's proud. She looks down on people. She's quick with her tongue and spends money recklessly. Sometimes I wish I could show her what matters: simplicity, humility, respect. But she's just so angry, quick to insult, and I don't even know who she truly is when she's not performing for others. Papa Thomas listened, his gaze heavy with understanding. Does she respect you? He asked quietly. Bernard shrugged. When it suits her needs, sometimes yes. And does she respect herself? Silence. The old man's sigh filled the room. I have watched women my whole life, my son. I can tell the ones whose spirits bring life and the ones whose pride is a poison. A wife is not just for show. A house full of riches is nothing if it is also filled with noise, pride, and disrespect. You need peace, Bernard, not a parade. His look softened. Bring her home. Let me see her for myself. I will bless your union if what I see is humility, not just in how she acts around me, but in how she sees those she thinks are below her. If I see arrogance, I will tell you, even if it wounds. Bernard nodded, submission in his shoulders, but anxiety clouding his eyes. Maybe she could come this weekend. Is it a test? No, Papa Thomas smiled. It is not for her to surprise me. It is for her to surprise herself. Later, Bernard left for a glass of water, and Papa Thomas watched him go, pride and concern warring within his old heart. As another midday sun scorched the city, Papa Thomas resumed his quiet routine. Sitting on his humble bench outside a bustling supermarket, his plastic bowl in front of him, not for begging, but for those rare souls who wished to share their excess. Some people spared coins. Many didn't even meet his gaze. He didn't mind. He used these quiet hours to watch, to listen, to let life teach him its lessons anew. That's when the now familiar rumble cut through the heat. A black Range Rover, music blaring, skidded to a stop. The door slammed, and Vanessa, dressed like a walking billboard for everything high-end and exclusive, stormed toward Papa Thomas. She pulled off her sunglasses and spat. You again? What are you still doing here? Disgraceful, dirty old man. Why do you sit here like a goat waiting for scraps? She didn't wait for his answer. Do you enjoy shaming your generation? Poor people like you have destroyed this country. Useless. She jabbed her finger toward his heart with each word. Then, voice rising, she hurled insult after insult, calling Papa Thomas every name that bitterness could recall. The old man's silence was like armor. He didn't defend himself, didn't move. He only exhaled, as if releasing something poisonous back into the air. But not all observers are silent allies. Just then, a woman with 2 full bags stepped out from the supermarket, pausing mid-step. She dropped her groceries, chin lifted. Enough. Vanessa whirled around. Who are you? Someone who's forgotten more sense than you'll ever have. The newcomer, Mary, replied coldly. How dare you speak to an old man like that? Vanessa cackled. So, another rat has found her courage? You want some too? Mary ignored the bait. You're proud, but you're also empty. You call people names because you lack even the smallest decency. For a moment, Vanessa looked unsure, but pride reinflated her. Do you know who I am? My boyfriend can have you arrested. Mary didn't flinch. Try it. Arrest me for asking you to respect an old man's dignity. Vanessa's face flushed, rage building. Mary stepped closer. One day, you'll meet someone whose power you can't see, and you'll remember this moment. Vanessa, hands shaking, spat toward Papa Thomas's sandals once more and stormed away. The crowd that had gathered exchanged glances, quietly mourning that such anger existed in their city. As silence returned, Mary approached Papa Thomas, kneeling to his level. I'm so sorry, sir. I couldn't let her talk to you like that. He smiled gently, gratitude bright in his tired eyes. Thank you, my daughter. You are brave enough to speak up when cruelty rules the air. They sat together, Mary's courage calming the tremors of hurt and humiliation in his heart. She listened quietly as he explained his routine, that he found solace sleeping in an empty store at town's edge, granted by the kindness of a humble shopkeeper. It isn't much, but it keeps the rain off my back, he confessed. Mary's heart twisted with compassion. Papa, I studied agriculture. I've been out of school a year, no job, but what I have are strength and hope. Instead of sitting here, maybe we can start something small together, behind the store even. With seeds, water, patience, the earth can surprise us. Would you farm with me? Papa Thomas was taken aback. His voice was small, but steady. Why would you offer that? Mary smiled. Because kindness needs no reason. Work brings dignity. Let's plant something. Tomatoes, okra, vegetables. Let's make our own harvest, Papa. He was quiet, 1,000 thoughts passing through his mind. Then, softly, you're too kind. Mary shook her head, her eyes shining. No, Papa. Good people deserve help too. He looked at her, a final proof that goodness still walked the world. I will think about it, Mary. She grinned. Don't take too long. Even a small basket of okra can teach stubborn old men a thing or two. They laughed, lightly at first, and then with genuine joy. When Mary rose to leave, she promised to return the next morning. As she walked away, Papa Thomas looked at the sky for the first time in years and whispered to God, "Is she the one?" The following morning greeted the city with shimmering clarity, sunlight dancing on everything the furious rain had left behind. Some said the air felt different, lighter, as if hope had borrowed gentle winds to sweep away the residue of yesterday's pain. Papa Thomas felt it too, that subtle shift. For years, the dawn had brought the same heaviness, the cautious step from store to sidewalk, the knowledge that disdain might greet him with every passing stranger. But today, as he approached his bench, there was a purpose behind every movement, a cautious optimism he hadn't dared entertain for a long, long while. Mary was already waiting. Her figure was framed against the pale gold of morning, a small bag of seeds clutched in one hand, gardening tools bristling from a faded backpack. She waved as she saw him, her smile wide and unforced, infusing the day with more promise than the brightest summer. Bloom. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, as he settled gratefully beside her. "Kept thinking about how we could turn that empty lot behind the store into something alive. Do you want to take a look?" She offered him the tools, and together they circled the small patch of dirt and gravel, stomping through tufts of stubborn weeds. The ground was uneven, but workable. It would require sweat, patience, and faith, things the old man knew well. He glanced at Mary, saw the hope in her eyes, and nodded. "Let's begin. You teach me. I will follow." So they labored together as the city bustled on, sharing stories through laughter and moments of comfortable silence. Mary taught him how to prepare the earth, how to plant rows, how to nurse tiny green shoots with gentle hands and steady watering. In return, Papa Thomas told stories, parables about storms weathered and quietly won, moments of courage snatched from the jaws of despair. He told her about the joy of seeing a seed break ground, about how sometimes all a person needs is to feel useful again. As days folded into each other, passers-by began to notice the change. Where once there'd been a neglected slice of urban dirt, now hopeful rows of green broke the monotony. People stopped, curious, dropping coins or lingering to ask questions. Some marveled at the transformation, others simply smiled, happy to witness kindness blooming in the most unlikely quarter of their world. And always, Mary and Papa Thomas worked side by side, the city's least and its overlooked champion, forging something quietly revolutionary by refusing to let cruelty define their days. Elsewhere, a whisper of change stirred in Bernard's heart. News of his father's partnership with Mary reached him not through boasting, but as gentle rumors. From neighbors and friends, Bernard began hearing about the pair tending an unlikely patch of earth where before nothing had grown, about laughter and kindness and a strange new hope that hung in the air like summer honey. His curiosity piqued, Bernard paid an unannounced visit one afternoon. He watched from a short distance as his father worked, brow glistening, hands caked with soil. Yet there was a new vigor about him, a spark that Bernard realized he hadn't seen in years. Next to Papa Thomas, Mary moved confidently among the plants, her soft voice encouraging and wise. Bernard saw his father smile at her, a smile free of the guarded, weary resignation he'd come to expect. Mary spotted Bernard first and waved. "Come, lend a hand." "We're about to plant the last row." He hesitated. He, in his tailored shirt and polished loafers, looked every inch the man who'd never broken a sweat for something so humble. Yet something in Mary's open, welcoming manner broke through his discomfort. Wordlessly, he rolled up his sleeves and crouched next to them, letting the earth stain his hands. In his heart, barriers began to fall. After the work, they shared a simple meal under the shade of a leafy tree. Mary recounted her journey, her passion for farming, her struggles to secure employment despite her degree, and her unwavering belief that if you cannot change the world, you can at least change your corner. Papa Thomas listened, his pride for Mary growing. Bernard listened, too, realizing for the first time that kindness and strength weren't mutually exclusive. What was more, he saw his father's respect for Mary, genuine, unforced, the sort of approval he'd always hoped to receive for himself. Lessons bloom. At sunset, as Bernard walked home, he realized the day had left a mark on him that no suit or business meeting ever had. Perhaps this, he thought, is what my father meant all along. Vanessa, meanwhile, remained untouched by these changes. Her world was still one of luxury boutiques, expensive dinners, and carefully curated social posts. But even she was not immune to whispers. Stories of the beggar and the girl farmer spreading among the city's influencers like fresh gossip. Vanessa dismissed these tales with an eye roll. Goodness, she believed, was for the naive. Her world rewarded only ruthlessness and spectacle. But the universe, ever balancing deeds with unexpected consequences, was already working on its next revelation. That week, her phone trembled with an unusual notification, an email marked urgent from venue management at the Grand Tower, where she'd booked an exorbitant suite for her birthday celebration. The message was abrupt. Due to unforeseen building maintenance, her exclusive event was canceled and her advance deposit non-refundable. The news sent Vanessa spiraling. She hurled her bag against the wall, furious at this latest affront. Useless people, useless city, she called Bernard, her voice strained with frustration. How can this happen to me? Fix it. I want that money and my party back. Bernard, still raw from the humility of his day on the farm, replied gently. Sometimes things don't go our way, Vanessa. Maybe it's a sign to slow down, to check what really matters. She scoffed. I don't pay you to lecture me. If you can't help, just say so. But Bernard had already made a decision. For the first time, he did not apologize as he hung up. Vanessa stared at her phone, a growing sense of unease pooling in her chest. In a world where she'd always been able to buy comfort, she now found herself surprisingly alone. The cracks in her flawless life began to spread, small but undeniable. Days bled into each other, and Bernard found himself returning to Mary and Papa Thomas's garden many times. Each visit left him quieter, more reflective. He watched as strangers were drawn in not just to the physical garden, but to the warmth, the sense of community, the generosity that radiated from its caretakers. One afternoon, as Bernard sat with Mary on the curb, he found himself confessing fears he'd never put to words. I spent so much of my life chasing things I thought were important. Money, status, the approval of people who wouldn't care if I disappeared tomorrow. I never realized until now that peace is something you plant, not something you buy. Mary listened without judgment. We all want to be seen, Bernard. The question is, do we want to be admired or loved? Admiration is easy. Love takes effort, and the willingness to admit we're wrong sometimes. He was silent. absorbing the truth. Papa Thomas approached, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Son, I have watched you grow, stumble, and stand again. I prayed not for your wealth, but for your heart. Wealth is a flower, character is the root. A garden with no roots withers in the sun." Moved, Bernard squeezed his father's hand. "Thank you, Papa. I'm starting to understand." As evening fell, Bernard walked home with Mary, both silent but content, feeling that the world, however flawed, still held spaces where kindness could reign. The time finally came for Bernard to introduce Vanessa to his family. Despite the storm that had begun to rage outside, wind rattling the windows, thunder threatening the city's fragile peace, Vanessa arrived impeccably dressed, her face a perfect mask of composure. Where others saw the weather as a nuisance or a test, Vanessa treated it as another challenge to be conquered with poise and detachment. Bernard met her at the door, tension in his posture. As she stepped inside, the contrast between opulence and humility clashed. Vanessa's heels click-clacked on the polished floors, her perfume thick in the air, her eyes flicking critically over the modest, lived-in comfort of Bernard's home. Papa Thomas met her with a smile and an outstretched hand, pure graciousness in every gesture. Vanessa glanced at him, her own hand only reluctantly extended, fingers barely squeezing his. Dinner was a masterclass in awkwardness. Papa Thomas tried to draw her out with gentle questions about her family, her dreams, even her favorite childhood memory. But Vanessa responded in clipped, guarded sentences. When Bernard mentioned Mary and the garden, Vanessa's lips curled into a tight, disparaging grin. "I suppose some people are suited to mud and manual labor," she said, glancing at Mary as if waiting for her to bristle. Mary, however, only smiled. "Work is a teacher. The earth rewards patience, not pride." Vanessa rolled her eyes. Such romantic nonsense. Papa Thomas watched them both, old wisdom flickering in his gaze. He was weighing, measuring, searching for humility or defiance. Yet the verdict was already forming in his heart. The uneasy dinner left Bernard with a heaviness he struggled to articulate. After the table was cleared and the remnants of the meal were replaced with steaming cups of tea, silence hung in the air like a stubborn fog. Papa Thomas, ever observant, perceived the invisible barrier between Vanessa and the rest of his small makeshift family. Still, he pressed on. Wisdom demanded that every heart be given its chance to reveal itself in the right light. With gentle persistence, he suggested, "The weather has softened. Why don't we take a short walk to the backyard?" "There's something I'd like to show." Bernard, sensing his father's intent, motioned Mary and Vanessa to follow. Reluctant, Vanessa checked the mirrors in her compact, but acquiesced, unwilling to give the old man a reason to judge her further. The backyard glimmered from the earlier storm. Moonlight pooled in the furrows, where vegetables and herbs grew in stubborn defiance of the city's concrete sprawl. The air smelled of wet earth, new beginnings, and the faint sweetness of flowering beans. In this sanctuary, Papa Thomas found his element. He stooped to pluck a green shoot, offering it to Vanessa, who recoiled. "This is okra," he said, voice as steady as the soil. "It feeds more children than you'd guess. Many consider it unworthy. Yet, in the famine, humble okra is often a family's last hope." Vanessa, restless, scoffed under her breath. People of means shouldn't have to stoop so low. Papa Thomas regarded her for a full moment, sadness etched in the lines of his face. "The ground does not remember our pride, Vanessa. It only remembers the seeds we plant." Mary knelt beside a row, gently brushing dirt from a sprouted leaf. Bernard watched the quiet exchange, understanding now why his father had insisted that he wait before making decisions of the heart. In the hush, Mary took Vanessa's hand, not with force, but with surprising assurance, and pressed the okra shoot into her palm. "Hold it a moment." Even the unwilling hand can help something grow. For a split second, something flickered behind Vanessa's eyes, a memory, perhaps of a gentler childhood, or a longing never before admitted. She quickly replaced it with a sneer, but something inside her had, for just that moment, shifted. Papa Thomas smiled to himself, satisfied that the greatest lessons were not always the loudest. The night deepened, the city's usual noise muted by the storm's exhausted quiet. In the small living room, Mary and Papa Thomas prepared old blankets and pillows for Vanessa and Bernard to sleep over. Tradition demanded that guests, even reluctant ones, not be let out after a heavy rain. Bernard volunteered to help Mary clear the dishes. In the intimate quiet of the kitchen, he found words tumbling out that he had meant to shield. "Did you notice how my father was testing her?" he whispered. Mary smiled, rinsing plates with steady hands. "Not testing, Bernard. He was offering a lesson." The heart learns best, not when it is threatened, but when it is inspired by example. Bernard leaned against the counter, arms folded, mind wrestling with unfamiliar vulnerability. What if she never changes? What if I'm left to choose between my father's wisdom and the woman I convinced myself I love? Mary dried her hands, her eyes glowing with a rare empathy. Sometimes love, real love, is knowing when to let go, trusting that holding on will only cause harm, like clinging to a rose's stem, even as the thorns draw blood. Bernard looked at her then, searching her face for judgment, but finding only compassion. "You're strong, Mary." She grinned. "You're just seeing a gardener's courage. It's what the weeds teach us every day." As they returned to the living room, Bernard realized Mary's presence was beginning to feel like sunlight in a place he had long since written off as cold. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat with Papa Thomas, distractedly scrolling her phone. Eventually, perhaps out of restlessness or perhaps curiosity, she set down the device. "Why do you let yourself be stepped on?" she asked without malice, more in bewilderment. "You worked your whole life. Now you let people insult you. Where's your pride?" Papa Thomas looked at her, long and slow. "My pride is in my patience. Even gold before it shines is pounded and burned. The world is rough, Vanessa, but you waste your strength fighting everything outside yourself, never what's within. Vanessa blinked, unaccustomed to being spoken to so plainly. She didn't answer, but something about the steadiness in his tone, the calm in his weathered face, stuck with her. Morning brought a new world. The rain had washed the dust from the streets, leaving the city sparkling with promise. Vanessa woke earlier than she intended. The gentle clatter of Papa Thomas in the kitchen rousing her from fragile sleep. She watched, out of sight, as he moved about his small space, preparing a humble breakfast. There was a measured, peaceful rhythm to everything he did. The way he observed the eggs as they sizzled, the deliberate care with which he wiped the old wooden table. It was a scene so achingly ordinary, and yet, to Vanessa, strangely moving. She found herself thinking about her own mother, who had once risen before dawn to prepare meals no one ever really thanked her for. She stirred memories she buried beneath layers of jewelry, busy routines, and carefully constructed defenses. What would her mother say if she saw her now? Haughty, impatient, quick to dismiss anyone she thought beneath her. Vanessa didn't have an answer, and in that uncertainty, she felt, just for the briefest moment, a longing to be understood rather than admired. Breakfast was quieter than dinner had been. Mary chatted with Papa Thomas about their plans for the garden. Bernard contributed updates from his work, and Vanessa listened more than she spoke. Once, Papa Thomas caught her eye, and with a kind smile, passed her a plate of food. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer, almost uncertain. "You're welcome," he replied. That simple exchange made something inside her flutter, small, almost imperceptible, but very real. For the first time in years, Vanessa didn't feel like putting up her usual walls. She allowed herself to simply exist in the company of people who didn't measure her by the size of her bank account or the trendiness of her clothing, but by a gentleness she was only just beginning to recognize. After breakfast, Bernard suggested they walk to the community garden. Vanessa wanted to protest. Shoes and mud rarely went together in her old world, but something in Bernard's hopeful expression silenced her hesitation. The path to the garden was lined with puddles and blossoms sprung by the storm. As they neared the patch that had become Papa Thomas and Mary's pride, the air turned rich with the scent of growing things: tomato vines, basil, beans, and the ever-present okra stretching toward the sky. Neighbors passed by, offering greetings and a helping hand, some stopping to admire the transformation. It was clear that what had started as an act of compassion now served as an anchor for the community. Vanessa saw children pulling weeds without complaint, an elderly woman handing Mary a small packet of seeds. Laughter as much a currency as the few coins dropped in a tin for upcoming harvests. "Do you see what you started?" Bernard whispered to Papa Thomas. The old man laughed. "Ah, my son, it is never one person alone. Kindness is a ripple. The giver of the first stone never knows how far the circles will spread. Vanessa observed the garden, the work, the camaraderie, the undeniable sense of purpose. She watched as an excited boy showed Mary a small, imperfect strawberry he'd saved just for her, his cheeks red with pride. For the first time, Vanessa felt the faintest pang of envy, not for wealth, but for something simpler. To be genuinely needed, to matter in the quiet, unglamorous moments. This sense of belonging, she realized, could not be bought. Suddenly, her carefully guarded world seemed both smaller and lonelier than before. And in that realization, the tears she'd not permitted herself in years stung at the corners of her eyes. The days that followed were an awakening for Vanessa. While she told herself repeatedly not to get attached to these people or their simple lives, she found herself returning again and again, not out of duty to Bernard, but out of genuine curiosity. She learned how to twist tomato vines and how to tell when basil leaves were just right for picking. She memorized the names of the regulars. Mr. Ade, always ready with a joke. Mrs. Oluchi, who sang old lullabies while she weeded. The twins, Ijeoma and Ugo, who competed to see whose plot was greener. Slowly, through these tiny acts and names and smiles, Vanessa's brittle shell began to crack. One stormy afternoon, a new crisis threatened. A pipe burst at the edge of the garden, flooding the lowest rows and putting the newly sprouted plants at risk. Panic rippled through the group, but it was Vanessa, to her own astonishment, who acted first. She directed others to fetch buckets, formed a human chain to bail water, and did not hesitate to ruin her expensive shoes if it meant saving the garden's heart. When the last of the water was finally cleared, the group collapsed in exhausted relief. Vanessa, soaked and muddy, looked at her reflection in a rain-dappled window and laughed. A rich, genuine laugh that startled her. She'd never seen herself like this. Not composed, not flawless, but unmistakably alive. Papa Thomas clasped her shoulder, his touch both prideful and gentle. "You belonged here all along," he murmured. "You just didn't know it yet." For the first time, Vanessa allowed herself to believe it might be true. As the weeks passed, Vanessa's transformation became the quiet talk of the neighborhood. People who once regarded her with a wary curiosity now welcomed her with open smiles and casual greetings, as if she had always belonged. She was no longer the outsider who measured worth by price tags or privilege. She was simply another pair of hands working the garden, another voice making plans for the next harvest. Mary, observing these changes, felt a private joy mixed with admiration. She had always believed every person was a landscape waiting to be tilled. Some fields more stony than others, but all fertile if given patience and sunshine. One afternoon, she took Vanessa aside as they rested beneath the shade of a guava tree, handing her a cup of cool water. "Do you feel different?" Mary asked gently. Vanessa hesitated, then laughed. "I feel lighter, somehow. I've spent my life building walls, expecting people to scale them just to reach me. But here, there's no need for walls at all." Her voice wavered with emotion. "I never cared how people felt about me. Now, I think I do." Mary nodded. Compassion changes us in quiet ways. You let yourself care, even if it hurts sometimes. The guava tree rustled in the breeze, leaves whispering secrets only those willing to listen could hear. Vanessa looked up at its branches, remembering times she had dismissed comfort or forgiveness as weakness. Yet the strength she discovered now was that of gentleness, the kind she had seen in Papa Thomas, who forgave offense without letting it shape him. There, beneath the tree, Vanessa made her own silent vow. She would strive to build a life defined not by conquest, but by the gifts of kindness she could offer others. She would let herself belong, truly belong, and use her influence not to widen gulfs, but to bridge them. The garden flourished, each plant a testament to the human capacity for renewal and change. Papa Thomas became known as the wise gardener, not just for his skill with plants, but for his ability to nurture hope in those around him. Bernard, watching the transformation both in the earth and in Vanessa, felt a sense of peace he had never experienced in his adult life. One evening, as dusk settled over the garden, Bernard took Vanessa aside. He led her to a quiet part of the patch and put his hands on her shoulders, looking earnestly into her eyes. "There's something I need to tell you," he began. "When my father first asked to meet you, I wondered if he was asking me to choose between the life I wanted and the values I'd forgotten. I see now he wasn't asking for a choice. He was asking for growth." Vanessa listened, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You've helped me find that, Bernard. I am not proud of who I was before. But here, with you, with Mary, with Papa Thomas, I feel like I'm seeing the world anew." Bernard smiled, his heart swelling. "Love isn't just feeling good about someone, Vanessa. It's seeing them at their worst and believing they can be their best." She nodded, overcome by gratitude. Her hand reached for his, and together they watched the sunset bleed golden oranges and purples across the sky. A silent promise that endings could become beginnings if given enough light. For the first time, Bernard knew, truly knew, that he no longer had to run from love or from himself. A neighborhood's sense of unity deepened as the garden's bounty grew. With every harvest, the group gathered, laughter and song filling the air as baskets overflowed with beans, tomatoes, okra, and fat strawberries. The garden's original goal, to help those in need, became just one part of its identity. Now, it was a place where dignity thrived, a living monument to second chances. At the annual Harvest Festival that year, Papa Thomas stood at the center of the gathering, his voice resonating over the crowd. "I once thought that respect was measured by how high you were above others. Now I believe respect is how deeply your roots grow in the shared soil of community." Children danced around him, their joy unself-conscious, their laughter echoing in the golden sunlight. Vanessa joined them, her designer clothes traded for a simple dress, her laughter honest and contagious. Bernard and Mary worked side by side, exchanging stories with neighbors and teaching others the skills they'd learned. The festival peaked as the sun dipped lower. Neighbors brought their favorite dishes, and prayers of gratitude were offered by people of all backgrounds and faiths. Papa Thomas raised a basket of fresh vegetables, giving thanks not for their abundance, but for the people who had come together to make the garden and each other whole. In that moment, the trials and insults of the past faded, no longer burdens, but steps in a journey toward understanding. The entire community celebrated the simple truth. No one was too poor, too proud, or too lost to belong. Late into that night, the old man and Mary sat together beneath a canopy of stars, serenaded by crickets and warm breezes. The peace that enveloped them wasn't simple quiet. It was the profound calm of wounds mended and fears faced. Mary, who had always believed that hope could be planted like a seed, felt validated in every lesson the garden had taught her. "Papa," she said, reflecting, "do you ever regret the hardships you faced?" Papa Thomas smiled softly, eyes crinkling at the corners. "Regret? Sometimes. But only until I remember what suffering has planted in my heart. Without rain, the seeds don't grow. Without hardship, compassion is just a word." Mary touched his weathered hand. "Thank you for teaching me that kindness is the richest harvest of all." Through those quiet moments, the lessons grew deeper. Mary found herself planning to expand the project, inviting more youth, offering workshops, starting a small market for anyone whose hands wanted to work the earth. Vanessa, Bernard, and even former skeptics volunteered, transforming the once small garden into a cornerstone of change. Life would never be as easy as the fairy tales promised, but now the difficult days could be met with strength rooted in community. The city wasn't perfect, but it was evolving, one garden, one act of kindness, one redeemed heart at a time. Years later, the legacy of Papa Thomas and Mary's garden outlasted every storm and season. The patch of earth that had begun as a haven for the overlooked became a vibrant hub, a place where lessons of humility, forgiveness, and grace were passed from elder to child. Vanessa, now a respected leader in local organizations, spoke openly about her journey. Her story became one of redemption, how a life can pivot from pride to service, how one's worth is measured not by accumulated wealth, but by seeds sown in the lives of others. Bernard and Mary, united in purpose and eventually in marriage, ran educational programs that taught the next generation to treasure the dignity found in honest labor. Papa Thomas continued to be the heart of their community, his wisdom echoing across gatherings, meetings, and quiet conversations beneath the guava tree. The city, too, was irrevocably altered. Neighbors who had once hurried past each other now paused for greetings. Strangers shared both vegetables and stories. The garden's harvest fed not just empty stomachs, but hungry souls, reminding everyone that true riches are found in respect, kindness, and the willingness to see humanity in every face. And on evenings flush with stars, Papa Thomas would walk among the rows of plants, tracing the journey that began with humiliation and ended with healing. Whispering his thanks to God, he knew he had succeeded, not just in planting okra, but in igniting a garden where every soul, no matter how battered, could find a place to blossom.